Hello, and welcome to Through the Veil, where we get together to share stories and remember the wisdom that belongs to us. I'm Alyssa Canrudin, and this week I'm speaking with Sian of Mother Becoming. She's a doula, a wise woman, tending the edges of all of the rites of passage that we experience. We discuss the intersection of birth and sex, altered states, and the descent into the underworld that birth brings us to. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. I think you're going to like it. Hello.
Hiya, how are you?
Good. I have been so looking forward to this conversation. Yes, I think, when did we meet? We met at a flock event in Vancouver, right?
Yes, we did.
I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, something like that. And I think Wapio was there, and it was like the first time I'd ever heard her speak. And I just remember hearing you ask your questions and bring things in. And I was like, whoa, she's the next wise woman for our generation. I have to stay in touch there. So I am really excited for this conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Yeah. So why don't you start by telling us how you got into birth work? How did you land here?
Sure thing. It was not the path that I thought I was going to have from a very young age, growing up in quite a rural community in England, with a very matriarchal family that I realize now. Lots of aunties by blood or not, kind of taking care of everybody, and I was always the child and then the teenager that was looking after all the babies by default. But I had this idea that I didn't want to stay there, that although I loved it, I could see the value of it. There was like a real wanderer's heart in me. And I knew early that I was going to leave that nest, despite not very many of my family members doing that. They kind of stay really close and take care of all of the elders as they grow. And so I thought I was going to be a journalist. I went to university and I did my English and media degree, and I was very focused on it, just knew what I wanted. Actually did become a journalist for a while there. I moved to Canada November 2009. The day before I moved here, I found out I was pregnant with my second child. My eldest is
Mm.
3. And it's no coincidence that I found out that I was pregnant with Esme the day before leaving, because Esme was like my bridge into a
Mm.
whole new me, a whole new world. But I had to begin her there, kind of bring a piece of me across. Um, and so in writing for the newspaper here while I was pregnant, I came across a lady who was a doula. And I should back up just a little bit. When I arrived here, I tried to find a midwife. I'd birthed my first baby at 23 in a little old birth center with these matronly midwives. And we just give birth with midwives in England unless there's inherently a problem. When I came here, I was looking for a midwife, and Jeremy's, my husband's auntie, said, "Oh, no, obstetrician."
Mm.
And I was like, "I don't know, there's nothing wrong here. Like, why would I? I don't get why we would have an OB." I was like, "I want the same as I had before." And I was struggling a little bit. I was writing for the newspaper. I came across a lady called Helen, who was a doula and also a midwife in training.
Mm.
So the stars aligned. Sometimes it's who you know, right? And
Mhm.
she kind of got me in with some midwives here. So I proceeded on to give birth to my second child, July 2010, second water birth. Um, Fast forward 2 years later to 2012, I was sitting in a friend's house drinking tea, about 6 months pregnant with my third baby. And I enjoyed birth. I like to read about birth, but I wasn't thinking it was going to be anything to do with my dharma, birth work. But I was sitting in my friend's house drinking tea, and it was just a regular day. There was nothing special about it, but something literally spoke to me. Something just said to me, be a doula.
Mm.
And I'm quite an impulsive person, and it's always worked out really well for me. Um, and I kind of really heard it audibly, and I didn't really second guess it. I just went home and looked online and found the generic doula. I think you know which one it is, the generic doula training.
I think I've done a couple of those.
Yep. Well, signed up there and then, did it within a month, like a couple of weeks, I think it was. And it was okay. I
Mm.
did that course, and I was pregnant myself. I met some really cool people there. Kind of felt like I was being told what I already knew, but from a different perspective, because I knew all of this having been a birthing woman. Now I was hearing how to tend, and I was like, of course, this makes sense. That would be how I would tend to. I attended 4 births in those 2.5 months before I gave birth to my third child.
Wow.
So I went hard and heavy, and I learned a lot in that time. I attended really different births. I attended a home birth. I attended an induction that was very long. I attended a home to transfer to hospital birth. I was really around for a long time because I was new to it. And, when we kind of like rush to be savior too early on, rush to be savior at all, you end up being in a space that you don't need to be for way too long. But I've got a really good grasp. But more than anything, I was like, what the living hell is this? Because I'd given birth to 2 children. And then after 6 months, after birthing my third, I went back again too early, but I went back because I was already deep in. And I was witnessing hospital birth for the first time. I'd never birthed in a hospital. I'd never I'd never actually been in a hospital to be tended to myself at all. So it was just a really eye-opening experience. And I knew deep in my body that, I didn't come from an anti-establishment family or a family that was super holistic, but I did know deep in my body that this is not the way that birth should look. This is not the way that women should be treated. And it raised in me this activist that I'd never met in myself before. I spent a good couple of years, I would say 3 or 4 years, really using my voice on social media to, I think I'm a writer down to my bones. It's like as much of me as being a birth worker is. So it was really easy for me to channel my thoughts and grievances and challenges through my voice and put it out into the written word, where there seemed to be this platform of people that were just resonating with what I was saying, whether they were in birth or not. They knew that something was going wrong. There was a disconnect between potential and possibility and what was actually reality. I spent quite a few years in that realm of kind of speaking out loud, ruffling some feathers in my community. Definitely became very much a lone wolf when it came to being a doula. I wasn't part of any of the associations. I had my partner, Jennifer, who created sacred pregnancy retreats with me here in Calgary. She was on the same page as me, a couple of others, but mostly I was just a very solitary birth worker. This brings the witch up in us, the one that has to kind of do her work at the edge of the woods and be ridiculed or be kind of blasphemized or something from the outside. And still it kept gaining momentum. Still people were kind of listening. And I was starting to get towards a place where I was connecting with really ideal clientele, people who truly knew what I believed in, what my value systems were. They connected deeply with it. And we started to go on a journey together. So that essentially what happened for me is that I said after I want to say it's about 6 years ago now, 7 years ago, I've been in birth work for 12 years. It came to the point where I said, I'm no longer attending hospital births. I don't want to fight anymore. I've done that. I've put my voice out there and I've given kind of my opinion and my experience. And I'm not going to fight the system anymore. I'm just going to perpetuate what I know to be real and true. So I've been a home birth doula now since then. And that has come with a lot of really deep, enriching lessons. I've been really humbled in that time. I've had my ego decimated. I've had a chance to meet myself in the places where there is mistrust and cynicism and break down the edges of that, so that now I sit in a place of I do truly trust birth. But even when I thought I did, I didn't. It took so many experiences of dissent, actually, in order to find myself where I am now, which is that what I feel is an embodiment. I feel like I've gained all of these tools over the years as I've spiritually kind of cleansed and and broken down and refined and got lost, so that I sit in a place now of being a matriarch. My children are 17, 14, nearly 12 and 9. I'm no longer the mother raising small children, and I'm sitting in this place of having a basket of tools, and I'm kind of bringing them in and using them, the ones that have organically kind of unfolded for me in my journey. And I can't imagine being anything other than a home birth worker at this point now.
Yeah. What a great journey. What sits at the forefront of your basket of tools right now?
Mm. I think my reverence for the very archetypal Inanna Venus journey of descent, death, and rebirth.
Mm.
Yeah. I can apply it to everything in life, all of the rites and passages, all of the initiations. I think Wapio at the last workshop that she did at my house, Wapio is our elder for anybody listening out there, and she's the basis of many of my like more enriched teachings. She asked everybody in the room what their niche was, and I was first to answer just in the formation of the room, and it came out of my mouth as if I never had to think about it ever, and it was ceremonialist. I hold space for all of the rites of passages, for menarche and ceremony, for pregnancy with mother blessings, for postpartum with closing of the bones. For I've been a ceremonialist. I've married people. Um, I've been with people through their losses and ceremonially held space and set ritual for them there. So yeah, the basket at the forefront, I think, is my ability to create ceremony and bring ceremony to all of the rites, and also that intrinsically involves you honoring the dark parts that people don't want to look at. Even in the most beautiful thing in the world, which is birthing a baby, there is death, destruction, rotting, trauma sometimes, the retrieval of trauma and healing. So yeah, that Inanna descent.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me how how do I want to phrase this?
Hmm.
Yeah. How are you bringing that into these rites of passage? So yeah.
Okay. By okay, so this could go so multi-layered.
Mhm.
When we birth, and forgive me if you've been through this on your podcast prior, but I want to touch on the altered states of
No, do
consciousness.
it, please. Yeah.
On our brain waves are an incredible thing. Just like wavelengths, they travel out and out and out so that they meet everybody around us. And so when we honor one another's brainwaves and the altered states of consciousness that comes with those deepening and going lower, the entire room can go there with them. That's why in a hospital with bright lights, with lots of noise, with lots of sound, we're staying in a space called beta brainwave. And it's a high brainwave state. It's what we function in when we're communicating and conversing and thinking and brainstorming. And it's great, it has its purpose, but in order for us to go down to the depths and birth, we have to allow our brainwaves to start to slow down. Now, this happens at the beginning of pregnancy. I can see it happening from the conception journey through the first 12 weeks. I watch women in an altered state of consciousness. For me, I feel like that's why they go into that 7-week mark where the baby comes online, accepts their spirit, and then kind of settles into the body. So I see women in this altered state then low down, and it's overstimulating to be out in public when you just start to carry life and you have to carry on. Then we kind of like go into a normal state through the mid portion of pregnancy, maybe more into alpha. So we've gone down a little bit into more of a dreamlike state, and we kind of can stay there through the mid portion. Many children, like autistic children especially, will stay in those spaces of alpha, even theta. It's the imaginal realm, you know. And then when we approach labor and birth, we start to go down even further. So we start to go down more towards the theta realms. Well, we're in alpha, then we go down to theta, and then eventually we're going to go down to delta. Each level down, I am pertaining here to a gate, to Inanna's gate. If you know the myth of Inanna, she's the Sumerian goddess of heaven. She
Mm.
has a sister, a Reshka girl, who lives in the underworld, and Anana has everything she wants and needs in heaven. She knows there's something down in the underworld that's calling her, and it's her sister, a Reshka girl, who sits in grief over the loss of her husband. And
Mm.
the story is quite a long one, but to break it down fast, Anana tells everybody in the kingdom that she has to go down to this realm to go be with her sister Ereshkigal, the dark half, and everybody in the kingdom is warning her against it, that she'll never come back. And she goes anyway, asking three women who are her consorts to come down and find her after 3 days if she doesn't come back up herself. She has to go down through 7 gates to the underworld, and she does. And at every gate, there are two guards asking her to remove some of her fineries. She gets down to the 7th gate, which is the gate to the underworld, and she has a choice point of stepping through and meeting the mystery at the other side, which looks very scary. It's very deep and dark down there. There's no sound, no familiarity. She doesn't know who she is anymore. She has nothing left. She's naked as the day she was born. And she walks through this gate, and there is an altercation that happens. And she ends up dead because of the grief of her sister Ereshkigal being so angry that this light half could come down to the dark half and think that she could just merge. This is the decimation process. So what we've just experienced here, in my way, I know that our elder talks very much the holistic stages of labor as going up a mountain.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's the opposite. When I
Mm.
witness birth, I watch a complete crumble, and that can sometimes look like extreme power. It doesn't mean that somebody's feeble or meek, but we watch people physically remove their robes, remove their things. You see their ego be decimated. You see them cry and like go so deep, dark down into themselves, and then be fearful and also so deeply curious and excited for what's at the other side of that last gate. We're at transition there. We have a choice point at transition. We can go into that after transition in the quietude. When we've gotten to our widest state, we have a choice point there. We can either have a woman work really hard to figure out what her next step is and get her into her head, get her back up into beta brainwave, or we can stay down there in deep delta and have her align, have her mind aligned to the baby that's going to land soon, have her breasts aligned to the fact that they're going to produce milk and feed a baby soon, have her mind aligned to the fact that she's going to be a mother and make that transition. And if we sit with her in deep delta, then she can move through that gate. She will melt and move into that gate because there's nowhere else for her to go. It's way too far up. And she will just melt through the gate and be there, and she will birth, and that will be the decimation death process. With life, there is always death. It's the same. There's always that duality. And then when we have allowed a woman to go down through those gates, go down through the archetypal descent, the same one that we watch Venus do in the sky, as well as Inanna, as well as all of the seasons of the year that move from winter, spring, summer, autumn, and the moon cycle. The same thing. It's all the same cycle. If we sit with her there and she's allowed to do that, and she's allowed to die and burst and just blow into the flames and produce this new life, then that new life that came out of her body brings with it her new life. She can then, after a rest, which in the myth is 3 days, if she can rest, then she allows herself to start moving back up through the gates. And she will never pick up the old fineries because she's never the same again. She's forever changed. This is the same through any initiation. When we go through initiation, which oftentimes involves a loss of something, whether it's the baby in the belly, the old self, the ego, a spouse, a home, a job, anything, a person in life, we're never the same again when we come back up on the rise. But if we're allowed to be fully in each phase, right, then we come up, and there should always be people waiting for you up there. I hope for every woman that she had those three consorts who were willing to go down and find help if needed, but knew that they couldn't do it for her. And so this is the realm of the wise woman that we choose. The wise women that we choose for ourselves when we approach birth are the ones who will say, Anana, you're choosing to descend. You're choosing a journey that can be hard and challenging. We can't go with you, but we'll be here waiting. And if you ever need our help, we'll come find you. So that's why I bring Inanna into everything, into all of the rites of passages, especially the ones that are involving the blood mysteries.
Oh yeah, I really see that. I see that. I can relate to that in my own births. I don't know if maybe I've thought of it that way, just not quite that eloquently, that's what it feels like. And that's how women describe birth as, um, I guess, yeah, I can see the trajectory either way, like the climbing the mountain peak for some people, I can see how it's like that. But very often, I just had someone on the podcast say, I learned that my medicine was not in like the peaks of orgasm, it was in the underworld of birth, and that was her birth
Mm,
medicine, and I'm like, that is probably the most common birth that I hear, and those are the kind of births I've had, and like the transformation you go through in just in like I've had 3 births now, and I've learned through them how to descend without fighting it. Like, just to
totally.
let it
And
happen, right? When I'm scared and I'm like I can feel the energy stays high and I'm afraid of what's coming next. I'm like, I don't want to do it. And I'll even say that in a couple of births I've
yeah,
said that. And in the last one, just being able to be like, more,
yes,
more, like,
yeah.
right? And just to drop down and
Mhm.
not that it wasn't painful anymore or that the
Yeah.
sensations they weren't pleasurable. But it was
Mhm.
really powerful and my experience of it was different. So,
Well, I think this is, I really love to hear you say that more and more. And we're talking about, oh, it's not in the peaks of orgasm, it's in the underworld, but the two marry. And we were
mm,
kind of touched on this before in our conversations off recording, where
mm,
I really see the deep correlation between sex and birth, and
mm,
more is a sensual experience. It is you tapping into the deep, instinctive, wildish way of being in the dark and still wanting more. And women hold back from orgasm. Women
mm,
are so afraid of the intensity of that orgasm, of releasing fluids, of the sounds that they might make, that they hold back and stifle themselves from the full extent of orgasm. The same happens in birth. You
mm,
see women come up into beta because they're afraid of what's going to come out of their body. What is it going to look like? What is it going to sound like? Are they going to break? And women in the depth of their sexuality are actually having to program themselves out of being afraid of the depth of that.
mm. Yeah, let's expand on that. We had talked a little bit about, you're saying the intersection of birth and sex, and yeah, the parallels there. What do you see?
I mean, like just from a very physiologic, basic standpoint, like for the birth process to unfold, we absolutely have to have the same hormones running through our
Mm,
body that are happening when we're getting turned on, when we're having sex, when we're trying to approach orgasm or a deep connective experience. Um, we have to have oxytocin running through our body. There has to be um, darkness, there has to be privacy, there has to be a respect there has to be this knowing that there's not going to be a disruption or an interruption, that the energy flow isn't going to get blocked by somebody else in the room or by beta brainwaves, because I'm very energetic both in birth and in sex. So if my brain what goes back up to beta and gets into its thinking state, then it's impossible for me to have the experience that I really desire. And
mm,
so birth is the same and sex is the same. In order for many of us to get the experience that we fully deserve and want, we have to have those conditions. So absolutely moving from home to hospital or just beginning the labor experience in a hospital where you're unfamiliar, you're not in your natural habitat, you don't have access to the normal sensory experience, you don't have the same things to look at, you don't have the same things to smell, you don't very often have the same things to taste, if anything at all, when you're in a hospital, you don't have the tactile things to touch. And so being out of that sensory experience of home has an immediate effect on how quickly we can move into our body, into our animal body, our primitive body, and get out of the brain and the fast mind. Um, Being at home to begin the labor process makes it a really slow descent. It means that you can be in Anna considering going to the underworld rather than in Anna being put straight at the third gate. We
Mm.
can be like, actually, for my third birth experience, I have precipitous birth for sure. My first baby was under 3 hours, my second one
Mm.
just under two. My third one, my midwife was like, we're just not leaving. But what it actually did was give me a good week of prodromal labor, where I know in hindsight now that what was happening was my
Mm.
brain was trying to go down and reconcile with the fact that there won't be this defining moment where, oh, I'm going to be in labor now because I've had to leave the house. It could be a really slow, gradual process where I'm actually not necessarily super aware of it, because when our brainwave state is moving downwards, we're not going, oh, that's alpha now. Oh, yeah, now we're in theta. It's like a melting process, right? The same is happening with our cervix at home. We can go about our day doing our thing. And don't get me wrong, it's not like we're not aware that we may be getting a little bit spacey, as they say, or
Mm.
that we're getting overstimulated by too much sound and noise or people, or that we have some cramps or some bloody show. And there can still be these signs, but it's so much more subtle, the
Mm.
ability to move down. And it's slow and sensual, and that all by itself, like the practice of slowness, taking our time to open to anything, whatever it may be, whether it be birthing or sex, is generally a lot softer and gentler on the body, on the
Mm.
mind, on the spirit, on the aftershock value of it. Right. So what happened with me with my third baby was that I had this week of prodromal labor, and I woke up at 6 a.m. or something, around, no, whatever time it was, a couple of hours before she was born. And my eldest was going to turn 6 the next day. So I decided quickly that I had to wrap her gifts. I could feel something going on in my womb. And I was just kind of like ignoring it more and more, because I was like, oh, it's been a week of this anyway, until suddenly I was like, oh no, this is happening. And I went upstairs to tell my husband, and it was time to get the kids up for school, the two bigger, older children. I guess it was school and preschool. Anyway, then I end up being in transition, braiding my eldest girl's hair for her for school. And they're only out of the house for like 15 minutes before my baby was born,
Wow.
almost free. Like the midwife just walked in as she was crowning. And I actually did love this birth the most. I loved it most because in the small amount of time that we had, me and my husband, 15 minutes before anybody was there, it was a very peaceful time.
Mm.
I had that 15 minutes of quietude before, with like gentle pressures, knowing that the whole time she was like just ready, and I was kind of holding her back a little bit.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I think that that's testament to how this slow sensual movement down, when we're in our own space, can actually also make us a little unaware of how far deep down and through the
Mm.
gates we already are. And for me, that was a really good thing, because I really value privacy and quiet when I birth.
Yeah, it gives you a whole different perspective to baby brain. Like women
Totally.
get teased about it and feel like they're trying to push through it and stay at their, like frontal lobe jobs and keep it going. And when you think of the functionality of it and how it's not a mistake and you're not getting forgetful in
Right.
any way that isn't functional, it's like those things don't matter. Right?
Yeah,
You're dropping down.
I love it. And I love to be the
Yeah.
person that is tending the edges of that and
Mm.
supporting it. I really have enjoyed the last couple of years. I've had profound birth experiences that have been sovereign and, um, oh my gosh, gentle,
Mm.
even if they've been really hard work, so gentle, like days long labors that have still been so gentle.
Mhm.
And one of the, like, there's been a few of the local midwives, I guess, here that have presumed that I'm now a free birth
Mm.
attendant, which I'm actually not. I don't
Mm.
advertise myself as that or anything, but these women have just been birthing their babies without anybody else being called in, because it's been such a slow, gentle descent, that when it came time, there was the panic, the urgency, the like
Mm.
bigness that we see very often of transition, and the last gate has not been apparent. They've been so deep down in Delta, and so have
Mm.
I, and so has their partner, that there hasn't been this like knocking, ringing sound, reverberation, like gravitas of, I'm in transition. They've just been there.
Mm.
And so these babies have just been coming
Yeah.
like that. And what I've really loved is to understand that the importance of the people in the room having a devotion to going down to Delta 2. And in Delta, we're not away with the fairies somewhere. We are so attuned and we're so alive. We understand, we hear, we see, we feel, we know what's going on around us, but the fear is gone because if there is anything going wrong, that attunement also alerts us to that very quickly,
Mm-hmm.
also. And it's real, it's not a fear from outside, it's not a societal fear, it's an embodied, sacred, yes, holy no fear
Mm-hmm.
that we can feel. So it's really important to get to Delta, not just so that we can have a beautiful birth experience, but so we can absolutely discern what is normal and what is
Yeah, there's so much clarity in Delta.
so much.
Like
Yes.
when, yeah, like I wonder, I don't know, like, do you have to be, like, I feel like I don't know that I got to Delta, or at least I was so afraid in my first birth. I was like really young in a hospital with just like
Yeah.
nurses and doctors who I didn't know. And I think in my last birth, there's so much clarity and knowing in Delta. Like I knew exactly what was going to happen when I needed to know what was going to happen. Like I didn't know a second before and I didn't care, right? Like it didn't, I was only living in that moment and I knew things like, oh, I know as soon as my water breaks, it will be on. And I know that. And then my water breaks right then. And I'm
Yeah.
like, it's okay. Now I know this baby's going to come like right now. Like I know.
Yeah.
And it's so solid. And I knew in that moment I would know, like you were saying, like I would know if I needed to call someone. I
Mm-hmm.
have no doubt. And it wouldn't be that high vibration fear that I sort of felt in pregnancy thinking about these things hypothetically. Like, what if this happens? It's not like that. I would know. And I knew it was fine. And so we just did it.
Yeah, so good. I love that clarity point. And I mean, I think that one of the problems that we have with people that are attending birth, like extreme amounts of time a month, is that they don't get adequate rest to
Mhm.
process what's just happened, let their brain move through its own cycles and let the things go so that they can get to Delta also. Like everything, there's so much that's staying up in beta often because there's still so much processing going on from what was happening before in different experiences. And then that brings trauma with it. And then the trauma is being brought into the next space and it's a knock on effect, right? So,
Yeah.
as birth workers, for anybody who's listening who's interested in birth, one of the key things that I speak to mentees about is it's absolutely imperative that you have a duty to yourself to clear, to ground, to process, to not take on more than you can actually deal with. Like, don't overbook, don't be overstimulated. This is not a job that you're going to do well if you're just jumping from pillar to post. And you have to kind of be the embodiment of the grounded rootedness generally in life in order for you to go and hold space for something that's as huge as an initiation like that.
Yeah, I can see how it is such a struggle for registered midwives, right? Who have to practice in a very particular way and take clients in a very particular way. And it would take so much intention to process each of those births, right?
Totally.
Like I don't think it's definitely not something that's being provided to midwives. So like, how could we better care for midwives so midwives can
Totally.
better care for us?
Absolutely. We have
Yeah.
like, I think this is a community, this starts to really like peter out into a larger situation.
Mhm.
Like societally, we just don't take care of the caretakers. The
Yeah.
therapists are like at their last straw a lot of the time and still showing up more than they probably should because of their hearts, their good hearts and wanting to and needing to, and the lack of um there's just not enough, right? So
Mhm.
this is where we start to filter out into anti-capitalistic values, moving into matriarchal, community-based, family-led values, which is what I stand for. Like I absolutely have capitalistic threads in me. I'm a Caucasian woman and I've been raised in a middle-class family, pretty privileged. I absolutely have capitalistic undertones that I'm trying to break down. But I do know that at the other side is this matriarchal value system, this way of women coming together in council, not necessarily always to agree, but to find solutions in a peaceful way that sometimes requires a little bit of conflict and conflict resolution and mediation. Women are incredible mediators. And when we do that, when we start to really focus on bringing the wise women together into council, having them have their crosswords sometimes and still coming out solution based, then we will be creating a better space for caregivers who need to be taken care of. You know, just the act of coming together and sorting through misaligned thoughts and any conflict, even that in and of itself is clearing.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, we like start to spiral out into a whole different topic of
We
community.
Tell me, how do you find what supports partners to descend into that state?
Giving them the space to show up authentically. So again, outside of the home, it's really hard for a partner to walk into a hospital and feel like a natural authority, which they are, because whoever it is that's going to be taking care of this baby and the birthing person thereafter has a duty and an obligation to them and a natural authority. So staying home and allowing that person, that partner, to have access to their person that's giving birth. I'll oftentimes lay down on a bed with a woman when she's birthing or when she's laboring, and she'll be in the middle, and I'm on one side and the partner's on the other, and we just breathe. We literally just breathe. Like we're lights are off. There may be music, there may not be, but we're breathing together through the contractions, maybe like collaborating, that person and I, that partner and I, on the like physical support of the woman if she needs it. But then between contractions, we're all just laying down and breathing and napping together. And the two of them co-regulate, because it's my priority always that I bring those two people together, that I'm not inserting myself into a real sacred, intimate space and making it about me. But sometimes the addition of having somebody who knows how the importance of that close intimacy can help facilitate it. So the co-regulation is really important. Most of the time in a healthy situation, the partner is the person that knows the woman more than anybody does. And so like trying to kind of remind everybody that that inner concentric circle of mum and partner is the most important, helps the partner to recognize their importance and value in just being the person, breathing together, locking eyes here and there, touch that feels secure and solid. And then they can move down into Delta 2, having the existence of a wise woman somewhere in the room, even if they're not in the room, but outside of it, that can take the pressure off of that partner so that they don't feel like they have to be all the things and know all the things, and then they can just be.
Yeah, because she already chose you, right? She already chose that person. Yeah, the same intimacy that makes a baby.
Totally. And she doesn't really want things to be proven. She just wants presence. And I think that can be spoken to relationally generally. A lot of the time, if you're already in relationship, it's not proof that you're always looking for, but you do require presence in order to feel connected, in order to drop down and be intimate in any kind of way and have a depth. So presence is important. Like when partners are like wandering off because they're in beta somewhere, thinking about the milk they've got to go pick up or something, that doesn't facilitate a deep connection between them.
Yeah. How do you find this flows through to postpartum?
I think that what I've witnessed in the last year, after being at quite a few births where it's been uninterrupted, is that postpartum is where we're slipping through the cracks. Like, and I'm talking immediate postpartum. So we're all getting really good at keeping our hands off birth. We're all getting really good at sitting on our hands and watching a baby be born into mum's or partner's hands. We're not so good at leaving it alone right afterwards. So when the immediate postpartum is undisturbed, what's happening is there is this tiny concentric circle again of mum, partner, baby. And then if there is nobody else around, all of that oxytocin flow is happening only in this tiny little concentric circle. What happens then is there's a bond, a deep bonding mechanism that's occurring. There's face locking that's happening with mum and baby, maybe even partner and baby, so that they'll never forget one another again at the immediate point of birth. The baby has not been taken away, rubbed down, patted, hatted, chatted, nothing, none of those things. That oxytocin is so rich that it's bonding them together. Not only is it doing that, it's telling the mum's brain, the mum's hormonal system, to send the hormones necessary to release the placenta. So I'm watching really easy, pretty fast release of placenta without anything by default. You'll see separation gush quite off quite quickly. You can see the placenta's detached, nobody is being disturbed. And there's this again, that slow, gentle return. There's not an immediate cry from everybody, oftentimes not the baby either. Everybody is kind of landing and getting to see what's just occurred and coming back into the body. And I'll oftentimes whisper to a woman, "You're done," just to signal to her that she's allowed to tell her body to the placenta can be done, and the journey, well, let's bring this to a close. So I watched this slow, gentle, organic unfolding happening, and there is a glow about everybody. There's a confidence that's just happened. Everybody just recognizes how capable they are in that moment. And they're like, "Oh my God, my baby, I can't believe you just did that." Baby too. Baby just went through an initiation. They did it too. And it's a really beautiful moment of this unit becoming solidified. What I'm happening on the other end of that is baby is born, and everybody who is kind of keeping themselves to themselves through the birth process is suddenly in motion. There is a rub down, there's a pat down, there's looking at the face, there's noise, there's voices, and sometimes it's sweet. It's like, "Oh, your baby." But there's so much happening that I'm literally seeing the energetic block happen between these three people. There's just stuff in the way. And so that's impeding oxytocin, which is impeding the body's ability to as easily release the placenta, which is having a physiologic effect. But we're also talking an emotional, spiritual effect here as well, because we've just interrupted something that didn't need interruption. Give everybody a moment. Everybody just needs a moment of gentleness or longer, and we can see everything we need to see from the outside here. You can see how baby's looking. You can see the vitality of the mum, what the whole situation looks like. Again, if we stay in delta, it's attuned and there's knowing. But I'm finding that immediately after birth, the delta is cut and beta is happening fast. And I see women get really discombobulated because, especially if they've just had a deep delta experience, primitive experience that was undisturbed, they then really kind of get confused about what the heck is happening now.
Yeah.
The flow of confidence that would have existed is kind of disrupted. So the altered state of consciousness needs to be protected after birth as well. And this is what I speak to a lot of clients about now, actually. Less about everybody knows, if we're asking for a physiologic birth, everybody kind of feels on board, understands what that means. There are parameters, and the conversations around the parameters. But an undisturbed physiologic postpartum, that's where I want to start going, because I think that's what's now becoming the lasting effect for a lot of people that I work with who already have an idea that they want physiologic undisturbed birth.
Yeah, I've seen that happen a lot in births that I've been to, and I've had births like that. And you see women unable to answer questions or be and they're going, "Okay, come on, sweetie, pick up your baby, come to," and you're literally calling her out of that state. And we think of postpartum hemorrhage as obviously a scary problem, but this just had me thinking, it's also connected, right? Our spiritual emotional, physical beings are one. It's not a separate thing. And you could think of it then as like when there's a postpartum hemorrhage,
Yeah,
like there's been a spiritual, emotional interference there. Very possibly, right?
totally.
That's the thing. And we think of like the physiologic thing as the biggest problem, but this is a rite of passage. This informs your future rites of passage. This informs everything. And like that's just as much of a disintegration problem.
Yes, I
Yeah.
hear you. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I just find a lot of questions come up after that. And the questions that I'm hearing are have this vein or this thread of the woman blaming herself.
Mhm.
And that I have an issue with it.
Mhm.
Like I have an issue with women having to now second guess and wonder if they did something wrong immediately for the commotion to have happened. And the commotion doesn't have to be huge. Remember that when we're in that wide open space of just birth to our baby, literally the widest our body and mind will ever be, we're very sensitive. Somebody could whisper and it can sound like a shout.
Mhm.
It's I'm reading this book right now about um it's basically a set of stories about people that are psychedelic guides. And I'm actually going to make it recommended reading for my next
Mhm.
mentorship because the way that they speak about holding space for people in psychedelic journey is so the same as it
Mhm.
is for holding space for birth. And it's because birth really is a psychedelic
Yeah.
experience. And I didn't feel like I've like consumed and worked with the medicine of psychedelics, and my birth journeys didn't feel like that. I did feel very much in my body rather than with visuals and things. But
Mhm.
the same things are happening in terms of us being tender and vulnerable and heart and mind open, and our consciousness is altered, and we're
Mhm.
retrieving things from really deep places within us. And so one of the lines that I just read recently was about one woman who was deep in a psychedelic journey, and somebody spoke to her and she thought that they were shouting in her face. And
Mhm.
everybody around said, no, she wasn't. But like the volume of things coming at you when you're not ready for it, when you're in that kind of altered state, is too much. And it can cause this like after conversation within the woman of like, why?
Mhm. Yeah, because it's definitely disturbed. Whereas, like, what if we just let it be? What if we just sat in silence? What if there's nothing wrong? Like there's no emergency.
And I want to like give credit to all of our midwives and obstetricians and labor and delivery nurses who are brought into the birth space to look and make sure that things are normal. And
Mhm.
at the hospital with L&D nurses and OBs, they're definitely looking for an issue more than our midwives are. Midwives aren't
Mhm.
necessarily looking for an issue, but they are there with this clinical background and this responsibility to
Mhm.
everybody to make sure that physiologically everybody's safe. So I'm not trying to discredit or take
Mhm.
away the sacredness, the sanctity, the duty of that. But I just think it's a conversation that isn't really being brought to the field yet. We've had lots of conversation about how to lead people through their labor, through birthing their baby, but this bit just is getting missed, and I think it's the missing
Mhm.
piece.
Yeah, and you're right. It's not malicious. It's like happy excitement from
Totally.
everybody about the fresh baby in the room and
Yeah.
wanting that mom to like look into its eyes like we are.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's different. And also like maybe it's just I think all these conversations are important to have so that we can see different ways birth can be done. And there's not one right way to birth for every
So
woman. You're going to ideally find the support people who align with what you want. And for some people, perhaps that's a hospital and some
totally.
labor and delivery nurses. And then just know what kind of birth you're choosing then, which is okay.
100%. And
Mhm.
I think it's important that everybody really does go into birth, both the people that are holding birth and the people that are birthing, understanding what their values and also what their triggers are, because that will inform either where you birth immediately off the bat or what you have to do in order to give birth in the place that you want to and perhaps don't feel safe to right now. It's
Mhm.
Pregnancy is an amazing time. Like I honestly show up to birth and most of the time I'm like, I feel like you could do this without me because The
Mm.
work really is prenatally, but the work is happens in pregnancy. There is a descent process there, if we look at it, of like facing all the things. And that also does include our hopes and dreams. I see so many people want to just dissolve any dream and hope of anything. They're just like, oh, I'll just go with the flow, whatever
Mm.
happens. And that's okay. But when I want to dig deeper sometimes and say, as a woman, as a human being, you are allowed to have hopes and dreams and want more for yourself than whatever unfolds. And I know there's a beauty in surrender, but sometimes I think that we're disregarding our hopes and dreams because we're afraid of the work it's going to take to get there.
And I think afraid of the disappointment too. Like if I put this out
Absolutely.
there and it doesn't happen that way, I'll be crushed. So what if I'm just like,
Totally.
whatever,
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
healthy baby.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely experienced that when I was having my third and fourth baby. I'd had these two beautiful experiences before I became a doula, but then I became a doula and then I was
Mhm.
talking about it left, right, and center. And I was like, good God, like what happens
Mhm.
if
Now
it
I'm in my
doesn't go as
head.
well as if it doesn't go as well as the first two times. But it's like we all have an ego and we can work with it or not, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I found for myself, I struggled to do the work. So this last birth, I didn't have any medical. I had a free birth or a wild pregnancy, like nobody with me along the way. Um, and for that particular birth, I felt like I couldn't do the work while abdicating my prenatal care to someone else. And it wasn't even like you go
Mm,
for prenatal care with your midwives and they're not actually doing it for you, right? Like they're checking your blood pressure, they're measuring your belly, and that's not the work that I needed to do in pregnancy. That's where like that's something I could have had or not. But I found that I would think that was the work, and then I wouldn't have to do anything myself. And that was just my journey in that particular pregnancy. And so in
mm,
having no prenatal care, I really took on the responsibility for myself and had to really look at like what is real prenatal care for me this time. Because I don't think every birth would be the same. Um,
that's beautiful.
yeah, and then I was able to actually look at those things and really look at the descent and allow myself to go there and spend time on the inner work so that I arrived at birth having done that this time.
Mm. I
Yeah.
mean, what would you say was the like most profound learning curve or lesson that you went on through that?
I learned that all of the wisdom lives inside of me already. All of the knowing about what my baby needs and my body needs sits inside me in like the quietest, stillest, softest place that I can't access when I'm chasing the toddler and when I'm like being that mom who's like driving all the kids to the sports. Or even going and getting my blood pressure checked and doing like the responsible prenatal things. It's not there. It's in a much quieter space where I would, for me, it would be like, I play piano. I can find that place after I play piano for a while, or I
Mm.
could journal, or I could be in nature. Those kind of quieter things for me. And yeah, I learned that all of that wisdom sits there and that I have access to it at any time. And I learned to get better at accessing it quicker and of
Yeah.
differentiating between the high vibration fear or anxiety and the actual knowing of what I need in my body.
I love that, Melissa. I think that that just speaks to the like importance of creativity in women,
Mm,
especially, you know, and in pregnancy. And there's like all of those courses that you have out there, like birthing from within. And in our sacred
mm,
pregnancy, there's some bits that are really artistic. And I mean, I'm certainly not a crafter, but it doesn't have to be crafting or even music. But I
mm,
like that you spoke to tapping back into some sort of creativity, and you're right to it in order to go within.
mhm.
That's where it sits. The creativity all lives in the womb, right? And I always wonder because it's been so many years now since I had lots of small children at once. I had like a what were they? Newborn, 2, 4, and 7 year old. And but it's been quite a lot of years since I've been in the depth of that. And now I do need to be reminded what women do when they have small children and they're pregnant again. Like, how are you accessing that space? Because the village mentality is one we're all striving, but it's seldom found.
Mhm.
like we don't have the help we want. So I like to hear from women how they kind of get back into their own body and in their own space when they're tending to so many different things at once.
Yeah, I had to really give myself permission to take that time and really, like, we have 5 children. Well, this is our 5th one that was just born, so it's a busy house. And so I really had to be, I actually gave myself the permission in that I wasn't going to prenatal appointments. And so I just told my husband, you know what, like, we're not doing that. So I'm gonna need like every couple weeks, you just take all the kids somewhere on a Sunday and I'm gonna go by myself. And I don't know, to a coffee shop, or I'm gonna, whatever it was, I'm gonna sit in the bedroom by
Mm-hmm.
myself and no one can come in for a couple hours. And yeah, and I just, for my own ego things, I needed some excuse, like to give myself permission. Like, I'm not going to these appointments, so that time I haven't taken. So this time will be mine. This is my prenatal care. I was like, this is what I'm gonna need.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
good. And just got a guy that's right on board with it. So, I mean,
Yeah.
perfect. So good.
So
So
good.
good.
And all the women's circles. I feel like that was also my prenatal care,
Yeah.
but yeah, connecting with other women who are also seeking that space was very helpful. Well, anything else you want to add to this conversation?
I think we've like journeyed far and wide.
Yeah, we have. It's true. Well, thank you so much. I love having this chat with you. I think you
Me
have to
too.
come back for more of the
I would love
wisdom you
to.
garner.
I
Yeah.
would love to. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. And I was so in the moment listening to Sian that I forgot to ask her what other offerings she has out in the world. I know you can connect with her on Instagram at Mother Becoming, and then you can check the show notes for what else she has going on and other places you can connect with her. In the show notes, you will also, of course, find the link for where to submit your birth story. New episodes come out every Tuesday. You can follow, subscribe, share, rate, and review to be part of the movement toward more powerful and peaceful birth.